All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Miles Fiacher. I'm the Assistant Director of Pre-Orientation and Operations at American University's New Student and Family Programs Office. Tonight, we are putting on a program that will be covering the upcoming fraternity and sorority life rush process, and we have Samantha Easby, Associate Director of Fraternity and Sorority Life from the Center for Student Involvement with us. So without further ado, let's listen to Sam give her presentation.
Great. Thanks, Miles. Um, yeah, I really appreciate you all being here tonight. Like Miles mentioned, my name is Samantha Easby, and I'm the Associate Director for Fraternity and Sorority Life here at AU. And we'll just jump in and get started. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I will get to questions at the end, but feel free as you're thinking about them throughout the presentation, to just throw them in the chat. So, just a little bit of what we're going to be talking about tonight. We will be giving an overview of the Fraternity and Sorority Life Office, be able to go through some terminology that maybe you're hearing as your student is talking about potentially participating in a recruitment process, a brief overview of our three councils, some benefits of joining. With that, we will then kind of delve deeper into each individual council's recruitment process. And then we'll also talk about campus partners and how we collaborate with them with our office. And then also just some tips and tricks for parents and families as they're navigating this process. And again, like I mentioned, we will have some time for some question and answer as at the end of the presentation. So just to give a quick overview of our office, like Miles mentioned, Fraternity and Sorority Life is housed in the Center for Student Involvement. So while Nadir and I do the bulk of the Fraternity and Sorority Life work, Ayana Wilson is the director for the Center for Student Involvement. So she really helps advocate and help facilitate all things fraternity and sorority life for our individual functional area. And then, like I mentioned, I'm the Associate Director for Fraternity and Sorority Life. I currently oversee our Interfraternity Council and co-advise our Intercultural Greek Collective. And then Nadir McCoy is our Assistant Director for Fraternity and Sorority Life, and he oversees our Panhellenic Council and also co-advises our Intercultural Greek Collective. We do also have a grad student who supports all of our functional areas and helps with programming, educational initiatives. We are currently in the process of hiring for that position for next semester. So, just a quick overview of some terminology that you may be hearing or you may be familiar with from your own experience in the fraternity and sorority community. A bid is an invitation to membership. We say bid because individuals will get a bid card when they are offered an invitation to join an organization. Crossing, that is when a member of a culturally based organization is initiated, for a lack of a better word. Formal recruitment refers to the Panhellenic formal recruitment process. And then headquarters, all of our organizations are sponsored and supported by national headquarters staff as well. Initiation refers to a student being invited and then initiated into that organization. So they've completed the process of joining and now they are a full member. Informational is a meeting for those interested in joining a culturally based group. They have it's an information session. They are called informationals, and they will go over the process of joining that organization. Intake, that's what we refer to our culturally based groups. That's their recruitment process. We refer to that as intake. Legacy means that you have a member of that organization in your family. Maybe it's your grandmother or your grandfather, your cousin, your aunt. You would be considered a legacy for that organization. New member. New member means that you have just joined the organization. You're a new member. New member class, first line. Your new member class is all the people that you join an organization with. Same thing with line. And then potential new member aspirant is what we refer to those going through a recruitment process with the hopes of joining an organization. And then some outdated term and then new member showcase. That is when our culturally based groups are presented to our community. They typically do that in a show style format. Recruitment counselor, Rho Gamma, you might hear that right now if you have a student going through the Panhellenic recruitment process. They are all assigned Rho Gammas, which are essentially kind of like orientation advisors that help them with the recruitment process. And then we do also have some outdated terms that we don't typically use here, but we do hear them from parents. And even some of these were used when I was going through the process, but the term like pledge, rush, colony, disaffiliate, Greek life, nationals, probate, those are all more outdated terminology. We still hear them pop up with our students because their advisors and family members also refer those, but we typically don't use those in our formal publications or communications. So just to dive in, we're going to have a little bit of a council overview, and then we'll dive into a little bit more about their individual recruitment processes a little bit later in the presentation. So like I mentioned previously, when I was discussing kind of staff roles, we do have three councils here at AU. We have our Interfraternity Council, our Intercultural Greek Collective, and our Panhellenic Council. Our Interfraternity Council is made up of 9 fraternal organizations. They are listed here, so you can take a look. We do have a council that supports them that get elected every November. So we have multiple people from each of these organizations that are join the council, help do programming initiatives, help lead this community forward. We have about 250 members in the Interfraternity Council, and each chapter is roughly about between 20 and 30 members. We do have some outliers there as well, but on average, I would say that the chapter size is about 20 to 30 as of right now. We then have our Intercultural Greek Collective. These are made up of both fraternities and sororities, and they are our culturally based groups. So this council houses our multicultural Greek groups as well as our Divine Nine organizations, which are historically African American groups. As you can see here, we do have a list of all of them as well. We have 7 organizations. We currently have 4 sororities and 3 fraternities on campus. We have a Latin-based fraternity and sorority, and then the rest are Divine Nine organizations. And then lastly, we have our Panhellenic Council. We have 7 Panhellenic organizations on campus. These chapters are roughly 75 members apiece. So our community here is over 500 women, which is pretty substantial. This recruitment process will be happening in January. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But this community also is supported by a council, which is elected from multiple members of these organizations. Every person in fraternities really has the opportunity to run for positions and run for leadership. And then I just want to highlight some benefits of joining the fraternity and sorority community. We do have a strong focus on leadership development, not only within our office, but also within chapters. A lot of chapters support leadership development through mentorship, promoting people into positions, giving students the opportunity to run large scale events, lead their peers, and also you manage an organization really, which really helps translate into really important skills for, their future jobs and careers. And we really provide that opportunity. Our office in particular also provides leadership development programming opportunities. So we will bring in speakers, do workshops, really to help our student leaders thrive, as well as learn learn all the skills that they would need to effectively run an organization. Networking, not only do they receive a really wonderful network of AU alums that are members of these organizations, they also are able to network nationally. All these groups have many, many, many members, and they all have alum clubs around the country. So your student, if they were to join, would be able to tap into that large alumni network, which would help them, if they move to a new city, make friends and connections, or if they're looking to break into a certain job field, they can reach out and that's a natural connection. So networking is a really positive opportunity. And that lends into career opportunities. We do have a lot of students who get their internships or future jobs because of their membership in these organizations. And like I mentioned, when we were talking about leadership development, mentorship, they have men and women who are above them in organizations who are able to support them through being a leader, leading their peers. They also will get mentorship from our office as well as alumni, which is fantastic. All of our organizations are really focused on scholarship and academic performance. So they offer things like helping you study, matching you up with a brother or sister that maybe can help you with a class, and also just overarchingly promoting the academic experience and making sure that all of the students are in compliance and making sure that they're doing well in their classes. And then lifelong membership, friendship and community. These organizations are really a wonderful way to connect and meet people, and to really develop deep and lasting bonds. And then also campus engagement. Our organizations, you don't have when you join, you can be members of as many organizations on campus as you want. And in fact, we see that when our members join, they are more likely to join another group, which is great because they get more experience, more community, and more networking opportunities moving forward. Our students are particularly engaged. I think almost every member of our community is involved in another organization as well. And then lastly, community service. All of our organizations have a philanthropic and community service component to their experience. So most organizations run large-scale philanthropy events once or twice a year, as well as do more small-scale community service projects on campus and in the DC greater community. And now we'll just dive a little bit into our recruitment and intake processes, just giving you some more information about what that looks like and how you can assist your student. So before we get into each council's requirements, I do just want to highlight AU's requirements for joining a fraternity or sorority on campus. So the reason we do this webinar in December, students are not eligible to join during their first semester of their first year of school. We require that they have earned a minimum of 12 credit hours before going through a recruitment process, and we do not count dual enrollment, AP, IB, any of those things. The only thing we'll take as a transfer credit is if they're transferring from a community college or they're transferring from another institution. Those are the only way that we'll accept those transfer credit hours. What we do with transfer students is we do request an unofficial copy of their transcript just so we can confirm their credit hour requirements as well as their GPA requirements. You also must be an enrolled full-time matriculated student to be eligible to participate. You also have to have earned a cumulative 2.5 GPA on the 4.0 scale. It is important to note that some organizations may have their own internal requirements or additional requirements that may be more stringent. So, for example, an organization might actually have a 2.7 GPA minimum. So that's important to note as well. But we do eligibility checks before anyone joins our community to make sure that they're meeting these requirements. And then just some general information before we dive in. Again, bids and invitations are not guaranteed. Joining a fraternity and sorority is selective. We cannot guarantee membership. They are invitations to join an organization. There's no promising of bids or invitations, so organizations should not be promising or gifting your student a bid and then before the recruitment process is over. That would be called bid promising, and that's not allowed in our community. We also encourage our students who are going through the process to do a lot of research. Each of our organizations has its own set of core values, things they do on campus, and also just what events they put on, what are they like. It's really important for them to go to events, meet different people, look at their Instagram, look at their website, see what information is out there about that organization so they can make sure that it's a good fit for them. Ask questions. We encourage all of our students going through the process to be open and transparent and ask as many questions as they want so they feel like they are making an informed decision. We encourage students to ask questions about finances, about really anything under the sun so they can get a better picture of what is going on in that organization so they can make an informed decision. And of course, Nadir and I are always on campus to also answer any questions that they may have that maybe they don't feel comfortable asking students. And then the last one, be authentic. We really want our students to come into a recruitment process really being their true self, and looking for groups that also match their values, and meet the requirements for the community they're looking for. So the first council we're going to talk about is our interfraternity council. They will have a recruitment cycle in January. Their recruitment process kicks off January 25th. We have an event called Meet the IFC. That is an opportunity for men who are interested in joining to go to one of our large rooms on campus. They'll get a chance to meet with every single organization, have an opportunity to connect and also to register for recruitment. Recruitment registration for IFC is currently open. However, it does not close until January 28th. So there is a lot of time if they're interested in registering. They do have to register for recruitment to be able to participate. We use that recruitment registration to do eligibility checks. So it's really important they get into the system and register if your student is interested in going through this recruitment process. After Meet the IFC, each individual organization will put on a myriad of events across the week. Students will be able to pick and choose what events they go to. So they can go to any different events the first half of the week. After about midweek, we move into closed recruitment. So that means your student would have to be invited by the organization to further events. They label each event as closed or open, so your student would be able to know what they're invited to, or if they're not invited to that. But all of the events the first half of the week are open to everyone, so anyone can go to those events. Just some things to know about this recruitment process. PNMs can receive multiple bids. They can't accept multiple bids, but they can receive them, and then they would pick which organization they think would be the best fit for them. And also, they cannot attend any events before recruitment begins. We're pretty strict with our organizations that they should not be having events prior to recruitment. They are allowed to table. So if your student is interested in learning more about the recruitment, they can absolutely go up to a table with members of an organization that is out there tabling on the quad. However, they are not supposed to have events before the recruitment cycle starts. And then just to jump into our intercultural Greek collective intake process. So each organization in our IGC council has its own individual process, which includes an informational or a rush session, selection, the education process, and then the presentation of new members, which we kind of touched on in our terminology slide. All of these timelines vary per organization. So it is challenging to say how long or how short individual processes will take. However, each organization turns in all of their information to us in advance, so we are aware of, what they're doing, when they're doing it, when they're having their new member presentations, all of those things. For our intercultural Greek collective groups, they do not have a recruitment cycle like our Panhellenic and interfraternity council. So there is no week where they do recruitment. They don't do recruitment every semester. The best way to learn more or to inquire about if an organization is planning to do an intake process, attend their events on campus, see if you like them, see if you're interested in joining, learn more about that organization. Going back to that slide where I said research, 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 make sure that you're, meeting with them, seeing what they do, seeing what they're like, and just looking at their website for more information in general. And then you should be looking at their social media to see if when they're having an informational. Typically, those happen either the semester before or during the first week of class. But if you're interested in a particular organization, I always just recommend following them on Instagram because they do post information about their intake process or their informational there. And then Panhellenic recruitment. Our formal recruitment process begins in January before class starts. So our recruitment process this year starts January 8th with P&M orientation. It is really important to note that students cannot move into the residence hall until the morning of January 8th. Our P&M orientation is typically at 7 p.m. that evening, so they would have all day to move in. Or if you can't get your flight back or you're driving back that day, as long as they're back by 8 p.m., that is totally, or 7 to 8 p.m., that is totally fine. If for whatever reason a student misses P&M orientation, we can make that work as well. But it is important to note that they cannot get into their residence hall until, oh, excuse me, the 7th of January. I wrote it in two different places. The 7th of January is when they can move into their residence hall. But recruitment itself will start on January 8th. We have round one happening January 8th, round two January 9th, and then January 10th is pref/round three, and January 11th is bid day. Just some things to know about recruitment here. They cannot attend any events before recruitment begins. They also must attend all events they are invited to. It is also a mutual selection process. So when we are going through recruitment, PNMs will make their selections and priorities, and so will chapters, and then we match up those priorities. And that's kind of how that works. Just some more detailed information about the Panhellenic recruitment process. I know that there's a lot of things circling out there because of all of the information about that's on TikTok and different things. At AU, we do not require recommendations. So students are not required at all to submit recommendations for individual sororities. Our attire, they will be given a t-shirt the first day of recruitment and just asked to wear jeans or something they feel comfortable with on the bottom. Round two is business casual, and then pref day or pref would be a more formal attire. So we have a set schedule. They will be receiving a lookbook, an informational packet, as well as some other things as we get closer to doing our eligibility checks. They should receive information and an email in the next couple weeks. It is also important to note that Panhellenic recruitment registration closes December 14th. So we close that before we come back for recruitment in January. The reason for that is we do need to give our housing and residence life team a list to allow students to move in on the 7th of January. And then just some other kind of questions that we receive over the years. Finances, each council is really different. So, for example, our IFC and IGC group, even within councils, they're very, very different. I would expect for our IGC groups, there is going to be a bigger upfront cost than joining our IFC and Panhellenic groups, just because their new member fee is significantly larger. Whereas you would pay you still pay more money as a new member for in that first semester for Panhellenic and for IFC, but it's typically not as large as our IGC groups. But yes, it is really important to note the bill or the dues the first semester of joining are typically more expensive. They pay for your PIN and initiation fees and things like that. Here at AU, there is no housing available for fraternities and sororities. So none of our organizations have a house or residence hall or anything on campus where they all live together. And then it's also just really important to know the time commitment of joining an organization. There are some expectations. Obviously, I just mentioned that a lot of our students are involved in many things, and that is absolutely the case, and they have time for that. But it is important to note that joining an organization is a time commitment. They have weekly chapter meetings. They also have events that they put on, and it really also just depends. And if they want to have a leadership position, that is a bigger time commitment. So when thinking about or talking with your student, it's just important to know and to understand what they feel like they can put into the organization as well, particularly if they join and then want to pursue leadership. And then just some information about the campus partners that Fraternity and Sorority Life works with, and that help support your students. So we do a lot of programming with our Center for Student Belonging. They really focus on, we do a lot of programming with them. We support underserved communities within our fraternity and sorority life community, and just make sure that everything is moving forward. We also do a lot of diversity trainings and things like that. Our Office of Student Accountability and Restorative Practices, they really work with us when we're talking about individual conduct cases if there is a problem, or alternatively, if we're doing preventative or restorative practices. So they're all trained in doing a practice called restorative circles. So if there's issues within the community, then we'll come together and have meaningful dialogue, which is really helpful. The Center for Wellbeing, we do a lot of mental health programming, making sure our students are supported. Housing and residence life always partners with us to make sure people can move in. They have a safe place to stay, and we also typically use rooms in their residence hall for things like recruitment. Our obviously new student and family programs. We do a lot of work with them as well. We do this webinar. We help with different things, and we hope to continue to do that partnership. We also work with campus police as we're looking at safety initiatives, and then community service as well. And then what can you do as parents? So I think when we talk about fraternity and sorority life, the biggest thing is really listening, asking questions, and making sure that your student feels like this is a great decision to join. The fraternity and sorority experience can be a wonderful experience for any student, but we really encourage students that are thinking about joining to listen to the organizations, what they're saying, asking questions. And we ask that you do that as, as family members or guardians as well. Supporting your student really is listening, don't being afraid, not being afraid to ask questions about the organization, encouraging them to find the organization that's right for them. And then to also help them be cognizant of the financial commitments of joining. I think that that's a big issue with students. So it's definitely an important question to ask as your students thinking about going through the process. And then that is it. And I can answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Sam, for the presentation. As she shared, you can go ahead and there should be a Q&A section in the chat, and we are more than happy to answer any questions that you put in there. Sam, I think you received a question about recommendations for joining fraternities or sororities. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a lot of I know that this is a practice that has kind of gone by the wayside, but some other some schools do ask for recommendations. Here at AU, we do not ask for recommendations, neither do our organizations. So a student who is going through the recruitment process does not need recommendations from anyone.
Awesome, thank you. We'll hang on for just a few more minutes if there's any questions. But with that being said, thank you so much for attending. Oh, we got another one. So for here, For IGC groups, how do they usually advertise Rush? Is it mostly flyers around campus, posts on Instagram, or something else? What have they done in the recent past?
Yeah, so I think our groups do all of those things to advertise informationals. Typically, I would say the best strategy is to follow them on Instagram just because colloquially, like that's where I feel like, and Miles can probably speak to this too, I think our students are more likely to see things on Instagram or social media. But they also do post flyers around campus as well. But we always recommend that they follow them on Instagram because they'll post things on their stories and different things like that. But mostly what I have seen on AU's campus in particular is social media and then hard flyers around campus and inside the residence halls.
I would also say for IGC groups specifically, it's really important to get to know the members of the organization because it's not like a typical like rush per se. So specifically like going to events and figuring out who the members in the organization are definitely helpful.
Yeah, if we meet with individual students, because we do have students who come in are interested in joining one of our IGC groups and aren't sure about how to kind of get started. They don't have a family member in one of those organizations or a mentor or someone to talk to about those. We always, like Miles said, we always recommend that they start go by going to the events to see kind of the different atmosphere of each chapter, what's going on, what do they like, what do they don't, and then also just meet with the individual members to see if they're interested in joining, and then just kind of, and once they've figured out some of those things, then be making sure that you're kind of looking out for their informational information.
Another thing that might be relevant to IGC groups is typically only preference for a specific organization is given to one organization. You can definitely take time to get to know the groups, but disclosing interest in a organization is typically only reserved to one organization. And then the other thing that would be important to know is discretion is practiced in the intake process so that no one should really like kind of like the culture around intake processes is that it's kind of like a presentation of the members of the organization once they finish their intake process. Any other questions? All right, that was a really great question. We will give it maybe like two or so more minutes, but if you everything has been answered, we greatly appreciate you attending tonight. I will add that this webinar has been recorded and it will be put on the family webinar page. If you have like if you want to go back and see it, or you know someone else who might be interested in seeing it, and you can contact Samantha or the Office of the Center for Student Involvement as well if you have any questions. But other than that, thank you so much for attending tonight. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.